I think we'd all agree that Omar Khan's made some big moves, seismic moves this offseason. He's also made a couple that are a little bit under the radar. Maybe there's a reason for that. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into hockey and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. The DeShon Elliott acquisition at safety wasn't going to be one of those that was going to blow the roof off of anybody's expectations. But then if you think about the nature of the position and who he'll be partnered with, that's almost always going to be the case. When Minkah Fitzpatrick was partnered with Terrell Edmunds, TE, by and large, underachieved per most people's expectations. Not mine, but per most. I liked him as a player. I loved his durability, appreciated how he'd be able to go up to the line of scrimmage, make tackles, and of course at that time, the safeties were making all the tackles, and felt like he had exactly the right level of humility to be working with someone like Minkah, understanding that your primary job is to make sure that Minkah can do his at an elite level. So in getting someone like Elliott, you were naturally going to be pursuing someone of that pedigree and of that personality. So it wasn't going to come with any wow component to it. And there's nothing to really overthink as to what went wrong at the safety position in general in 2023, because no one played, including Minkah. Everybody went down. And then they'd bring in other safeties to take their place, and they'd go down. So what you wanted to get there was someone who was just gonna be there. And ideally wouldn't cost all that much. Well, Elliott crosses all of those T's and dots all of those I's. Then there's another case, and that's Donte Jackson. That's different because Jackson arrives via trade, and it's a trade that most people really didn't like, even though for the most part they didn't like the player who went out and how he went out, referring obviously to Deontay Johnson. One would think that with Deontay going out, you'd have everybody just immediately saying, wow, that's awesome. Who'd we get? Wait, I don't care. But that's not what happened. Jackson was brought, and I would think this is pretty obvious at this point, to be the other outside corner opposite Joey Porter Jr. Joey's going to be the main guy. I would think that's obvious. He's going to do the heavy lifting. He's going to take on the other team's top wide receivers. How do we know that? Because he just did it, and he did so as a rookie. So what are you asking of Jackson? Let's start with that. What's his responsibility in this defense? Well, as I see it, he's going to be asked to be Levi Wallace. Really? He's going to be asked to be that guy. He's not going to be challenged with something greater. He's not going to be put into roles that are unfamiliar to him. So here again, this is where you make a decision. If you're Omar, especially if you're Omar, you say, this is not where we want to spend our money. This is not where we want to spend the capital that we have to acquire the player overall. And that means, I think I'm referring here to L'Jarius Sneed. Yeah, it would have been exciting as heck. But wasn't that just going to be something that was extraneous? Most teams don't have two number one receivers that you have to defend. They've got one. When the Steelers go into Seattle, they're thinking about DK Metcalf. And they had somebody to counter him. Not all that well through three quarters, but Joey got the job done at the end, right? Well, in Jackson's case, they just need somebody to do the job. In Elliott's case, I think they just needed somebody to do the job. And if they were going to spend big money, it was going to be somewhere else. I'm all right with that. I'm not any more excited about these two players than anybody else. I like Elliott more than Jackson, to be clear on this. I don't mean to lump them completely together. But I also feel like there are ways to bring in younger players, maybe through the draft, at those positions that allow you to look more toward the future, or in the case of outside cornerback, to make sure that Corey Trice Jr. continues to progress. Please don't forget about Trice. Don't do that. This is someone who was seen, I don't want to say universally, but pretty close to universally as a first-round talent before his knee went out. And then, of course, his knee went out again in training camp. I was standing actually just a few feet away from the kid when it happened. Your heart just rips apart. And anybody who was there that day in Latrobe knows what I'm talking about. But the injury that he has is something that is routinely, not just commonly, routinely fixable. Your bounce back rate from it is 100%. He has the mental makeup. He's strong. He's determined. He was around the facility all the time. Kind of reminded me of the way Calvin Austin carried himself in the season that he had to take off, where Calvin would tell me, I'm not going to consider myself a rookie in my first year. I'm going to consider myself a second-year player because of the amount of work that I put in, because of the amount of film that I watched, because of the time that I spent with veterans in the room learning the position. I'm going to be a second-year guy. Don't call me a rookie. I saw a lot of that in Trice, so he's still around. What you needed, to repeat myself, was another Levi Wallace, and they got that. And they got another DeMonte Casey, maybe a little bit better, in Elliott. Not a big deal, neither of them. When we come back, J1Q.
This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Exciting news from Live Casino Pittsburgh's Poker Room. Join them this month for the Westmoreland 300 Multi-Flight Poker Tournament, March 7th through the 10th, with a $25,000 guaranteed prize pool, plus accrue hours every day until March 23rd and come for an $8,000 cash drawing on March 24th, beginning at noon until 8 p.m. Also, during March, all 2-5 or higher Texas Hold'em players will receive a $40 food comp after playing for 1 hour. Any new players who mention DK Sports, that's us, at the poker podium upon your first visit to the poker room will receive a food comp after playing for 2 hours. More action, more winnings, only at Live Casino Pittsburgh's Poker Room. Follow Live Pittsburgh's Poker Room on X at Live Poker WML for promotion and tournament news.
Today's J1Q comes from Chris. He says, what exactly are players speaking of when they're referring to family and child care? I have 11-year-old twin daughters, and I would love to have my employer offer such things. If anybody doesn't know what Chris is referring to, it's, of course, the National Football League Players Association anonymous survey that gets put out to us in the media that does not go directly to the team. It's designed by its very construction to be an embarrassment to owners. It's supposed to make the union look like they're really tough and they're really taking care of their members, even though this is the worst union in professional sports. The Steelers, now famously, have graded very poorly on this survey. And most of that has to do with, in fact, I think almost all of it has to do with the families of the players complain about Acrisure Stadium. Why do they do that? Well, here I go stirring things up. But look, you're going to ask me the question. I'm going to give you the honest answer. All right. There are not all, but some of these families of players act as if they are entitled to be treated like incoming royalty when they come to these games. They're expecting luxury suites, massive spreads, rooms where they can all get together both beforehand and afterward. And that's just not the Rooneys. This has nothing to do with the Steelers per se or how they do stuff or whatever. But the Rooneys are just so low-key, they're the types that would approve those ridiculous white tents that were out on the riverfront until last year. Do you want to talk about embarrassing? You know? I mean, those were an eyesore and a half. They were right out there in full view of everybody. They used to be called the Copes Cabana, where Myron would conduct some things both before and after the game. But like, they had white tents out there. They also approved just a really half-hearted design for their stadium as a whole. They're the most no frills, no fanciness people. Considering how rich they are, that might apply many times over. So they don't even see this stuff. They don't think it's a real thing. And sure enough, when you heard Art Rooney himself get asked about this again this week at the NFL annual meeting, his response was defensive, but not in the way you'd think. He was like, we don't have a problem listening to our players, but we prefer to have the players just tell us this themselves. We don't need to be hearing or reading about it from the union in some survey that we know nothing about and we didn't conduct. We don't even know its validity. And actually, I think that's a pretty fair point to bring up. But if you think about this realistically, do you picture a scenario in your head where TJ Watt or Cam Hayward or Minkah Fitzpatrick approaches Rooney in the hallway on South Water Street and says, "Hey, Art, I just got to tell you, man, this weight room, this isn't getting it done for me. I don't feel like I can sufficiently prepare for AFC North football. My brother JJ, when he was in Houston, he told me about how the Texans had blah, 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 blah." I'm just making this up. Do you think that they wouldn't act upon it? Do you really think that he'd say, "Nah, we're not going to do that for you, TJ. You're only getting $20 million a year from us," or whatever it is. And I don't think it would be worth my time to spend another, $100,000 or so to fix up the weight room. Come on. Who falls for this stuff? Now, take this in the same spirit. Imagine one of these players or any player on the roster approaching Rooney in this same hallway at this same facility and saying, "Hey, Art, I brought in a bunch of brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and everything else the other day. I brought in like 30 of them, and I'm a little put off that I didn't get a full-blown luxury suite on this. What's up with that, Art?" That's what I'm talking about here. So they're going to feel perfectly fine putting that on some survey where they don't even have to put their name on it. This whole thing, I'm sorry, I've been laughing this off from the beginning because it's a joke. But I'm trying to relay it for you in actual terms here as to why it's a joke. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody who listens to Daily Shot of Steelers. We're going to do another one of these and continue keeping it real tomorrow.